You're listening to Middle East expert and keynote speaker Neil Lazarus, live from Jerusalem.
Hi, welcome to another pod broadcast by me, Neil Lazarus. First of all, thank you. Thank you, guys, for those of you who turned around to me and said, why aren't you podcasting? That's crazy. We love your seminars. We want to get more of them. We'll probably bring you over. But meanwhile, give us something to listen to while we're driving in the car, whilst we're in the gym. So one, if you're in the gym, I'm not going to be going. I'm fat. I don't like gyms. Life's too short. Die fat, be happy. But if you're in a gym, I respect you. And if you're driving, keep an eye on the road. Listen and look and let's drive safely. Bottom line, though, is I want to talk today about a number of issues, in particular those claims which you may have had, when people were talking, whether at the office, whether at university, whether in your church or synagogue, where people say, hey, isn't Israel just like a colonialist, white colonialist thing, that Zionism is a form of colonialism and European imperialism? Like, really? Really? Is that really the case? Let's try and look at that, because it really is kind of a crazy argument. I want to start right at the beginning with the issue of Zionism. I say it straight out there, and I mean it quite seriously, even though it sounds a bit weird. Zionism is probably the biggest branding issue that Jews have ever had. Why create a national movement that has an ism in it and a z? It sounds bad. If you called yourself Fluffy, I'm a proud Fluffy, that would have been okay. But Zionism? No way does that sound good. But on perhaps a more serious note, and I kind of mean that half seriously, is that the reality is that Zionism is a national liberation movement of an indigenous population, indigenous population of a country, Israel, Judea, which were expelled by the Romans, returning. In other words, this was home base for the Jewish people. Israel's home base for the Jewish people. It doesn't mean that most people live at home, but home's there to visit, home's there to come and sleep on the couch if you want to. By the way, if you don't live at home, don't tell us how to decorate it. Your family. Hold on, let's leave that for another podcast. The right of Jews abroad to criticize, yes or no, what's that relationship? I think it's an interesting one. Meanwhile, let's get back to our subject, which is the issue of is Zionism a white colonialist movement? The reality is, I think it's another example of trying to delegitimize Israel. What we're seeing it through some of these podcasts and some of the discussions we're going to have is the issue that they pick something which you can't agree with, whether it's apartheid, whether it's white colonialism, etc., and then try and portray Israel as that. It's brilliant. It really is. For the Americans, brilliant is an English word meaning very good. I said before, you're going to pick up a lot of British English terms here. We had dodgy, now you've got brilliant. But it's brilliant because they will say, Israel's apartheid, are you against Israel? No. Israel's colonialist, are you against Israel? Or do you support Israel, rather, excuse me? No. In other words, what you do is you equate, and I can repeat the point, equate the issue with, or the question of something in Israel, and you equate it to something which is negative. It's a way of delegitimizing. You don't have to agree with everything Israel says. You don't have to agree with the Israeli policy. We don't. The Knesset is a mess. Our national sport is having elections. But the reality is, this is a form of delegitimization. But it's absolute BS. Maybe I should call it BDS. It's absolutely crazy. Look, first of all, the Zionist movement was actually an anti-colonialist force. If you have a look, you look at the who they were fighting. They were fighting the British. I should know. I was born there. I was so impressed with Britain, I left the country, but I was born there. Zionist movement, the Jews, are anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist. The British was mandate. The British mandate. That was their enemy. Are you telling me that Menachem Begin is a colonialist? Absolute. It's ludicrous. I'm actually left speechless on a podcast, which is rather problematic. But the reality is that the Zionist movement were and are, have always been a movement which fights imperialism. Second of all, to picture the Zionist movement as something white goes beyond belief. Have these people been to Israel? Do they know Israelis? I mean, it's crazy. We have Jews from Yemen. We have Jews from Ethiopia. We have Jews from Syria. We have Jews from you name it. We're Jews. We're one people, but a multifaceted country with different countries. But you know what? I don't actually look at people's colour. That's the racism of this argument. The racism of this argument is they are saying to us we're racist because we're white. Come on. Come on. That's crazy. So do me a favour. When they talk about Zionism, you can use Zionism. I'm proud to be a Zionist. Yeah, I am. I'm proud to have a fact that the Jews can have a country of their own. And by the way, we don't have Israel because of the Holocaust. I hear that a lot when I speak to groups in Israel who've come from Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum. We don't have Israel because of the Holocaust. We had the Holocaust because there wasn't an Israel. It's different. I'm proud to be a Zionist because at the same time I can live in Israel and have a government which I can participate in. I can live in Israel and at the same time be a part of the building of Jewish history. I can be in Israel and be a Jew without having to define myself in the context of how someone else thinks a minority should be. That's why I'm here. That's why I live in Israel. It's the home of the Jewish people. But you know what? Not everyone lives at home. And we recognize and I think love anyone who supports Israel. Yeah, also in a critical manner. So, one, is Zionist a colonialist white movement? Crazy, crazy, crazy. Anti-colonialist, certainly not white. Tell them how it is. Let's go and bust a few more myths in 1 second.
This is Bill Clinton reminding you that I never had sex with that woman. Hillary and I have separate bedrooms. I've also never listened to a podcast by Neil Lazarus.
Sorry about that, but I thought it was cute. Here's the issue. Look, one of the things which I think is interesting is this idea of the Palestinians' continual claim that there is an injustice towards them. I understand and I agree with and I show empathy towards the Palestinians today. I don't think that the situation in the West Bank is good. I think it can be better. I can understand 100% how they are frustrated. If I was at a checkpoint, if I saw the walls and the fences, I too would be frustrated, but I'm also remembering what it was like before we had those checkpoints and those walls. Remarkably problematic for Israelis. We had suicide bombing here, bombs going off in the coffee shops and in restaurants elsewhere. But the argument that somehow the creation of the State of Israel is an injustice towards Palestinians, you know what? First of all, learn your history. Number one, the Palestinians have been offered a state more than once. I go back to 1947. The Palestinians were offered an independent state by the United Nations. If you remember the British, who we were fighting, anti-Zionists, sorry to labour the point, but the British leave the mandate after the anti-colonialist Zionists were fighting them. They leave, they hand it over to the United Nations. The United Nations say, two peoples, two states. Palestine and Israel, you would have had Jerusalem in the middle. Look at the map. Look up Resolution 181. And at the same time, the Jews say it sucks. They accept it, because better a bad deal than no deal. And at the same time, it is rejected both by Arabs living in this area, who later be called Palestinians, and the Arab neighbours. You could have had a two-state solution back in 1947. We could have had, nearly 70 years of independence of Israel and Palestine side by side. How many lives would have been saved? At the same time, I remind you that Oslo would have probably ended in a two-state solution, although to be accurate, it wasn't written in the Oslo agreements. And I also remind you that the Ehud Olmert government, even the Herzog opposition leader today, has come up with the same plan, which is a 96% withdrawal from the West Bank, a 4% annexation of the West Bank, as we discussed in our settlement podcast, and at the same time offering them 4% of Israel in compensation for land that was being annexed. You would have had a Palestinian state. But over again, as Abba Eban once said, the Palestinians never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. No, the Palestinian situation in the West Bank isn't good enough. No, the situation in Gaza is not good enough. But we have to point the finger at who is to blame. Those people who point the finger at Israel and say we are to blame totally for it. And yeah, we've made mistakes. We've done things which are also not perfect. But everyone who points the finger at Israel should realize that there's three fingers pointing back at them. The question I always ask is, what are the mistakes that the Palestinians have made? What are the... bottom line, if you have failed to get independence in 70 years, perhaps, just perhaps, there's something wrong with the national movement of the Palestinians. Just throwing it out there, but maybe they're doing something wrong as well. I'm not saying Israel's perfect, but you know what? Let's have a realistic, mature analysis of what's happening in the area.
Neil Lazarus' awesome seminars are educating, motivating, and challenging. Why not book a seminar today via his website, awesomeseminars.com.
The fact that Jews have a state isn't necessarily racist. People always say that, isn't it? A Jewish state is racist, is not democratic. Can you have a democratic state? Look, one of the things I would argue, by the way, is, yeah, I think there actually is a tendency not to be democratic here. And I put it out to you. I'm worried. I do worry about certain issues which are out there which challenge our democracy. I would go further, by the way. I don't think everyone in Israel values a democracy and what it means to be a liberal democracy and to respect the rights of individuals. I'm out there with you. But the reality is that's the very essence of Israeli politics. What does it mean to be a Jewish state? Does it mean that we're run by Jewish law? Or is just Judaism a default button of the Jewish people, of the Jewish state, if you like? That Shabbat's the day off, but you can do whatever you like. Look, as you know, there are dilemmas and there's debates within Israel about the very nature of a Jewish state. Should a Jewish state be allowed to define what, say, conversion is, or marriage is, or divorce is? How much should it impose the power of the state on the individual? Especially if that state is Jewish. Those are the discussions, those are the debates. I would argue the very essence of a Jewish state is those questions. Politics in Israel is trying to define, redefine what democracy is. It's not just an Palestinian issue or an Israeli Arab issue. By the way, I would argue that Israeli Arabs probably have less problems than many Jews because they have full rights. They have Israeli Arabs are represented in the Knesset. Israeli Arabs we have a judge who's an Israeli Arab. The guy who helped define the elections last time around was also an Israeli Arab, same judge. So I think actually on that level it's less questionable. The question on religious coercion, how Jewish should a citizen be forced to be, that's part of the debate. But that doesn't make us undemocratic. It makes us a political entity with a reality. In other words, that debate between, say, Meretz, the left-wing secular party, and Shas is classic, is amazing, is brilliant. I remind you, they sat in the same government with Yitzhak Rabin at the time. So they take debates, they take issues, which are in an Israeli form, but exist elsewhere, state or federal government versus local government or individual rights, and use it yet again to delegitimize Israel. What we're seeing coming back over these podcasts is this argument of, yes, there's real issues in Israel, real dilemmas. Not everything is great. There are problems. But that's not a reason to call for the delegitimization of the State of Israel. And if there's something you get out of these podcasts more than anything else, is this understanding of, let's create a mature understanding of Israeli politics. Let's have a real discussion and a real issue, and a real understanding of what's happening here. Our problem is that when we're dealing often on a very quick discussion with people who aren't listening, people are demanding for, one sentence answers. I think I give those to you during these podcasts. If it's not one answer, one sentence enough, I apologize. But what I'm trying to show you is something much more in depth. I truly believe that you can stand for Israel in a much more effective way if you are more knowledgeable. By the way, I throw out my Middle East 101 course, which is gone crazy, by the way. I mean, we've had quite a few thousand people download the Middle East 101. It's a short video. It's a short course you can do on my website. You can look it up on your phone, on my phones, on your phones even, via my app. You're telling me you haven't downloaded my app? Download my app, Neil Lazarus app. There you're going to see the following. In-depth answers, in-depth analysis. If you want 1 sentences, 2 sentences, because we don't have time, I'm happy to do a podcast with 1 or 2 sentences. Maybe I'm repeating myself, but I want you through these podcasts, because you found 15, 20, half an hour to listen, to get a much deeper knowledge of an understanding of what's going on in the Middle East. The soundbite, if you want to let me know, I can give you some classic answers, 1 sentence answers. But the reality is, spend your time, if you have spent your time to spare, which I assume you have if you're listening to this, looking for more, a much deeper understanding. The Middle East 101 course I recommend. Check out my other courses online, by the way. And you'll discover a plethora of courses on Judaism, on the Middle East, on public speaking, on how to be an ambassador for Israel, how to use the internet as well. All of those are on my app, which is called Neil Lazarus, which is a free app. You can also check them out on my website, which you know what the website is.
Neil Lazarus. Educating, motivating, challenging.
That was the wrong jingle. AwesomeSeminars.com. I nearly got that right. So here's the issue. What we've looked at in this podcast is the question of colonialism. We looked at the question of 2 states and failing to make those 2 states. And asking the question of, yes, having a critical understanding of Israel and an in-depth understanding of Israel to really be able to answer some of the critics, to realize that the tactic, if you like, is to find something which most people can't agree with, apartheid, delegitimate, white colonialism, etc., and then equate that to Israel. So it works as this zero-sum game. You're against that, you're against Israel. And trying to call for the destruction of Israel. What I would encourage you to do is, yes, get rid of the myths of white colonialism, of the Zionism is something terrible, that there's an injustice of the Palestinians, whilst admitting that the Palestinian situation at the moment is not right. And teach yourselves more to become more knowledgeable. You can contact me via my website. You can contact me via Twitter. Let's set up a seminar, if you like, locally. I also have, if you haven't check out my webinars on my website. They're kind of fun and they're kind of cool too. Meanwhile, those are a few thoughts. I hope you enjoyed it, and let's catch up again soon.
You're listening to Middle East expert and keynote speaker Neil Lazarus, live from Jerusalem. Neil Lazarus' awesome seminars are educating, motivating, and challenging. Why not book a seminar today via his website, awesomeseminars.com. If you like this, why not invite Neil Lazarus to speak at your synagogue, church, or school? Check out his website, awesomeseminars.com.